Good evening, you're watching London Live News at 6 with James Dickman. Coming up tonight, on his way to busk by playing his accordion, a day like any other for 87-year-old Thomas O'Halloran before he was stabbed to death in the street on his mobility scooter. An arrest was made following the incident in Greenford this week. Picket lines form at Euston Station as rail workers start their first day of industrial action for this week, with only 20% of a service operating across the country. Well, a dry stretch and the sun in full force again tomorrow. A weather update for you before 10 past. Also on the way, London boxer Anthony Joshua on his underdog status as he prepares to fight Alexander Usyk in a rematch after the Ukrainian nabbed his heavyweight titles last time around. And Tim Peake, the first Brit on the International Space Station, will be on the programme telling us about his new show about his life in space coming to the Palladium. All of that on the way, but first this evening, a man has been arrested on suspicion of murder after the stabbing of a grandfather on a mobility scooter in West London. Thomas O'Halloran, who's 87 years old, died at the scene on Caton Road in Greenford after being attacked on Tuesday afternoon. Detectives believe he was stabbed in Western Avenue before managing to travel about 75 yards on his scooter to Runnymede Gardens, where he eventually flagged down a member of the public for help. A 44-year-old man was arrested at an address in Southall. Detective Chief Inspector Jim Eastwood thanked the public for their overwhelming support. Well, Thomas is originally from the west of Ireland, and he was attacked on his way to busk, according to his friend. Footage of him playing the accordion has since been released. Also today, London has seen 39% of A-level entries awarded the top grades as students flocked to pick up their results this morning. As a percentage of students who received A-star or A grades, London did pretty well, with most regions in the mid-30s for that stat. The average for England was 39.9%, so a good 4% higher in the capital. Well, though grades have dropped compared to pandemic levels because they were purposely lowered from levels seen in 2020 and 2021 when students were assessed by teachers instead. However, the percentage is still higher than in 2019 when results were last based on pupils sitting actual exams. Education Secretary Will Quince spoke at UCAS's headquarters in Cheltenham today.
We know there was disruption for students over the past couple of years because of the pandemic. That's why we put in place adaptations, and it's why the grades largely reflect that. But of course, we've moved back to examinations, so it's the first time in 3 years that we've had examinations, albeit with adaptations. And I just want to say a huge well done to all the young people getting their results today. I didn't get the grades that I wanted and hoped for and expected to go off to university. It has always been a competitive process. It always will be. That's the nature of examinations and a system based on examinations. But my message is don't panic. It really is not the end of the world. You may still get into your first choice university. You may not. You may choose to go through clearing and go to a different university. You may go on to further education, go into an apprenticeship, or you may go straight into the world of work or come back to further education or higher education at a later point. Your grades are important, but they don't define you, and what defines you is your hard work and your motivation. So I would say, look, don't panic, speak to people at UCAS. I've been listening into calls here. They're here to help you, as are your teachers and lecturers at college. Speak to people, speak to your parents, make an informed decision. There are loads of options open to you.
Will Quince there. Now, also the big story today, the RMT's General Secretary Mick Lynch is back and talking in front of the picket lines in London at Euston Station as staff who work on Network Rail, represented by the Rail Maritime and Transport Union, the Unite Union, and the Transport Salaried Staffs Association, began striking once again this morning. Well, this is the start of 3 days of cumulative action in a long-running dispute over pay, jobs and conditions set to severely impact Londoners, as today it's just the rail, but tomorrow is the turn of TfL as buses and the tubes go out of action for 24 hours. Well, the RMT's boss said the Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps, is getting more and more hysterical over the rail strikes.
Well, Grant Shapps is getting more and more hysterical. I try to keep a calm temperament in everything that I say. I'm not angry about this. I'm determined to get a deal. Grant chap seems fairly desperate. What I think you're seeing is a man who's worried about his future. He's got to try and flex his right-wing muscles in front of a parade of two really right-wing people that are going to be his boss if he has a job in the next week or two. So I don't know what Grant chaps is up to. I don't think the employers really know what he's up to, and I don't think that the officials at the Department for Transport knows what he's up to. Last week he threatened to make everyone redundant on the railway by issuing letters called Section 188 letters. He put that in the Daily Mail at the weekend. 3 weeks ago he said that all overtime on the railway was going to be banned and he was going to ban it. All of which is outside of his control, by the way, because he says he's not involved. I think he's lost the plot slightly and he needs to get back on track and enable a settlement to this dispute.
Mick Lynch there. Well, MP Jeremy Corbyn, the former Labour leader, also joined the picket.
I've been on quite a lot of picket lines over the past few weeks of the various rail unions, and the public support is there. It wasn't always there. This time they understand. And I think in the campaign of the rail unions, they see something of the campaigns about their own lives. This is a very different time and very interesting. And there's that sense of working class communities coming together in unity. And I think that's a very important factor, and I hope the government and Network Rail are listening to that.
Do you think they are?
No. At the moment, no, but then we'll get a new Prime Minister in a couple of weeks' time, and hopefully they will realise that if they don't settle quickly with the rail unions, then the whole thing is going to cascade on. The CWU are now balloting to take action, as are the teaching unions, as are the health workers.
Jeremy Corbyn there with a black eye on his right eye. He said he had an altercation with a tree. Now, to another MP, Margaret Ferrier has pled guilty to breaching COVID rules after travelling by train from London despite knowing she had the virus. Ferrier, who is now an independent MP, having had the whip removed by her previous party, the SNP, spoke in the House of Commons in September 2020 whilst awaiting the results of a COVID test before finding out she was positive. She then took the train home to Glasgow despite knowing the outcome of the results, fearing she would have to self-isolate in a London hotel room for 2 weeks. The nurse who vanished in South London 6 weeks ago could still be travelling regularly by train, appearing dazed or confused, according to police. The last confirmed sighting of Awami Davies, who's 24 years old, was in West Croydon on the 7th of July, 3 days after she left her home in Grays, Essex, on the 4th, a few days earlier. Well, they say they've trawled through 50,000 hours of CCTV footage in order to try and find her, and the case remains a missing persons investigation. In a statement, they also added Awami has been depressed and in the absence of her medication and may be using alcohol to relieve that depression. And some good news-ish, London hasn't come last in a ranking of the most happy places to live in England. That wooden spoon goes to Boston Town in Lincolnshire, apparently. In fact, Kingston upon Thames in southwest London ranks as the 7th happiest area, according to new research by care company Guardian Carers. The suburb ranks highly when it comes to a wealth of green spaces. Well, their team analysed more than 300 local authority areas in England based on key factors they say contribute to all-round happiness, such as well-being levels, income, crime rates and access to nature. Well, Windsor and Maidenhead, 2 spots just outside the M25, were crowned the happiest. Right, to boxing now. And he's used to filling up arenas and stadiums in the capital, but in his next bout, Anthony Joshua is having to come to terms with not being the favourite. The Londoner is taking on the man who took his multiple heavyweight titles from him last year, the Ukrainian Alexander Usyk, in a rematch after losing in front of a packed crowd at Tottenham Hotspur's ground in September last year. Joshua has been talking about that underdog status.
Yeah, it is fun. It is fun. It is fun. It is fun because I like the pressure has challenged me a lot. Boxing, when I was winning, boxing's great. Life's good. Now it makes you realise what this game's about. It's challenging, very challenging. So yeah, it is good because I'm thriving under that pressure, but it's challenging personally because I want to do well.
Well, Usyk is a proud Ukrainian who returned home to help his country in the war effort against Russia earlier this year, and he erupted into a passionate song in what was a very memorable moment after the two went head-to-head. Take a look at this. Scenes from Jeddah there. That bout is on Saturday in Saudi Arabia. Time for a check on the weather now. Cloud cover sticking around overnight. Lows of around 18 degrees. The sunshine is back in full force tomorrow. Highs of around 25. Looking ahead to Saturday, staying in the mid-20s with patches of cloud expected in places. Sunday still warm, 23 degrees and cloudy. It's looking like it's going to stay dry for some time as we move into next week and perhaps further than that. Well, we'll be back in just a few short minutes, but coming up, we'll have more on results day. We'll hear from one guest who says uni is not always the next step as she appeals for more young women to take up a career in tech.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back to London Live News. Let's just take a look at some of the day's main national headlines affecting Londoners. A bit more context for you regarding the rail strikes we mentioned before the break. Only 20% of services are set to run due to the industrial action. Half of Britain's lines will close today and Saturday as more than 45,000 rail workers are walking out in a dispute over pay and terms. Some routes will have no services, and where they are operating, trains will only have been running from 7:30 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. on both days. Passengers are being told to only travel by train if necessary, particularly regarding Saturday, the next one. Now, pledges to slash taxes by Conservative leadership candidates are unrealistic unless they are matched by spending cuts. A think tank has warned today. The Institute for Fiscal Studies said large permanent tax cuts could add to pressures on public sector purses as the economic outlook deteriorates. Both Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss have promised tax cuts but say their plans are affordable. The UK will find out who is the next Prime Minister on the 5th of September. And the rapid decline in the use of cash during the pandemic has eased, according to banking trade body UK Finance. Consumers are returning to their preferred method of paying for goods, but its use is still forecast to drop to just 6% of transactions by 2031. The trend of the last decade saw the prevalence of card use, with it rising during the pandemic, with a particular increase on contactless payments to limit the chance of transferring COVID by handing over cash. Well, given that it's A-level results day for students, if you're watching this as opposed to out and about celebrating after receiving your grades, our next guest is here to plug a career in tech, in particular for young women. Heather Dorr works as a data analyst for UST, a digital transformation company. She argues more young women should be looking to take up similar careers to herself and to think about considering apprenticeships as an alternative to university.
There's a gender imbalance in terms of, the men and women working in technology today. So why are we trying to address that? Why am I trying to address that? Because, to seek to get the balance there, much like to seek to get a balance in more places, in pretty much everywhere these days. So that's probably the first one. But also, what I was seeking to allude to earlier was that technology is pervasive in the sense of, it affects all of our lives a lot of the time. We're often spent, how much time do we spend on our phones each day these days? It's, technology is a big part of our lives, whether we like it or not. And actually, the people who develop that technology, we need to have a greater reflection of the varied type of people there are in society. So it's not only about getting more women in technology, it's about achieving a greater diversity in the technology workforce, which, part of that is about the gender balance, but it's also about other kinds of diversity in the workforce.
You also see a problem in terms of a skills gap in terms of how we teach students who are involved in STEM subjects. What do you think of that?
Well, at the moment, there's not enough trained and sort of able, I work in data science, so, it's sort of keep a focus on data for the time. And we've got a gap in the sense there's not enough data scientists in industry at the moment. We're working to address that in a number of ways. Well, we're working to address that at UST in a number of ways, which is, obviously, we're seeking to recruit people from university, but there are other channels too. And part of the government's digital strategy is to sort of open up these channels. There are other channels too, being more modern apprenticeships. You can get data science degrees as you're working these days, which it can be attractive in a number of ways. Not least, you shouldn't get saddled with the amount of debt that a lot of students get saddled with these days. But also, the other things we're looking to do is seeking to bring in people from other parts of the workforce, and that might be retraining from different areas of the workforce. For example, last year we had a new member of my team join from teaching, and she's successfully now working for one of our clients. So reflecting on, so yes, there's a gap, and there's things that UST and our peers can do in industry to help to address that gap. Education is obviously a significant part of that. and it's not only the traditional sort of routes through university for data science and such like that are important. It's alternatives too.
What would be your message to any A-level students watching this now in terms of what you're saying, and also in terms of thinking about university not always being the right path, as you say?
What would my message be? I suppose it depends on what your A-level. If you're happy with your A-level results and you're going to the university you wanted to go to, then go for it and have a great time. If you're in a position where it's not like that, and that's how it was for me. I went through clearing, and I sort of took an alternative path. I would always say that's actually, it might feel like a terrible thing at the moment, but actually, there are lots more alternatives that you'll find and uncover as you progress through your career. That's certainly what I found. So, and I suppose I just sort of encourage everyone to like I say, it depends on how you're feeling today in terms of whether you got your grades or not. But if you didn't get the grade you wanted and needed, that's not the end of it. Just, there are alternatives, so seek those. The alternatives can be through apprenticeships and they can be through alternative means, but I'd just say keep going.
Heather there with some food for thought on results day today. Now, continuing on with schooling, for those still in education, it's the moment to start thinking about heading back to the classroom. According to sales data, this is typically the biggest day for school uniform shopping in London, with a worsening cost of living crisis, of course, helping no one when it comes to this. Consumer expert Kate Hardcastle is encouraging parents to make do and mend, and gave Alicia some tips.
I think there is a lot of pressure on we parents at this time of year. We've gone through the summer holiday almost, and it's that feeling that, right, it's back to school. That immediately, for a lot of people, makes them feel about the cost element of it. And we're in this spectacular, challenging time where we know we've got rising food prices, fuel prices. So I think first and foremost, it's asking yourself the question, is there anything from last year's uniform that can be repurposed and reused? What I've found over the years, and I think this is now like my 28th term as a parent, is the better we look after and care for the uniform, the more it will actually last us. So you get out what you put in. And I think it's a few words of advice and support, trying to help parents understand that if you do have to invest at this time of year, yes, it's absolutely the right thing to do to try and look after that uniform and make it serve you well.
You're encouraging parents to make, do and mend. How can they do this? What kinds of items are the easiest to update and make work for another season, another school term?
I think when you are a parent, you want to do the right thing for your children all of the time. And we want to make sure they've got everything they need, but it's not always affordable. And yet we've found from some research from StartRight, this shoe company, that 3/4 of parents are buying new all of the time when it comes to this back to school period. And I think that's a lot of pressure. So what we want to understand is, where can you afford to make a saving by using discount codes, voucher codes, getting really smart and savvy with your shopping? Where can you help uniform go further where it can by looking after it? And I think then the investment pieces, something like a school shoe, how you can look after that to its best life and like make sure you're getting that investment back. And when we talk about make, do and mend, it's something my nan always talked about and sort of drilled into me, that idea of taking shoes to the cobblers and looking after them and polishing them on a Sunday night. But those things, believe it or not, will serve you well. And as you get older, I think there's absolutely no shame in wanting to make your money go further. And I've realized that sometimes on an investment piece like a shoe, I get better value for money when we care and look after that. You're also balancing that with trying to get the best for your children in terms of their foot health. Our children's feet are growing all the time and changing all the time. So they do need support. They do need something that's going to last. But I've managed to get pairs of shoes to last a whole school year, which I didn't think was even possible, by buying a brand that's got a little bit of extra grow room in it. And that's all about the fit, learning how to fit it, and then also trying to make sure we look after it properly through the year.
Aside from the shoes, how can we breathe new life into school uniforms that maybe look like they're a bit past it, but perhaps still fit?
So, school uniforms have been one of those areas where you feel like it can cost a lot of money. It's definitely about trying to make sure that you look after to create longevity. One of the things I think we're guilty of sometimes is we want that new pristine school uniform picture, going back to school first day, everyone looking smart. But I'm going to suggest you wash your uniform. Anything that's new before wear, that's going to help with the longevity and life of it. Try not to tumble dry. Tumble drying, and I know it's a bit controversial, but even fabric softener can make uniform items much more bobbly than they need to be. Then that creates excess wear and tear. So natural drying is really good. They don't always need fabric conditioners. So check the labels, washing as cool as possible as well to try to keep the wash loads down. When then it comes to buying a bit of wiggle room in there, you know, I am not a sewer. I'm not very good at those handy techniques, but Wonderweber's been a friend of mine over the years. So on skirts and trousers, you know, taking a bigger size, adjusting them at the waist if that's possible, and then trying to bring up the hem a little so we've got a little bit more life left in it. If you've got items that you have in the cupboard still and you're trying to work out if they still fit, have a look, try them on, giving them some TLC before you get back to school to make them last a bit longer too. And this is where things like wiping off every night rather than shoving them straight in the wash, we can do great things with actually using some tools and techniques that we've got at home to be able to keep those items lasting longer. So just looking after them, taking care with them, and they will actually serve you well.
There you go, full of interesting advice today. You're watching London Live News with James Dickman. A reminder of our top stories coming up after the break. From a music career with Rizzle kicks to taking up a pen and writing, we'll hear from Jordan Stevens as he releases a children's book.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back to London Live News. Let's just run you through our main stories for the capital today. There's a few big ones. Starting with this, a man has been arrested on suspicion of murder after the stabbing of a grandfather on a mobility scooter in West London. Thomas O'Halloran, who's 87 years old, died at the scene on Caton Road in Greenford after being attacked on Tuesday afternoon. Detectives believed he was stabbed in Western Avenue before managing to travel about 75 yards on his mobility scooter to Runnymede Gardens, where he flagged down a member of the public for help. A 44-year-old man was arrested at an address in Southall, not far away. Well, Detective Chief Inspector Jim Eastwood thanked the public for their overwhelming support. Thomas is originally from the west of Ireland, and he was attacked whilst on his way to busk, according to his friend. Footage of him playing the accordion has since been released. Also today, London has seen 39% of A-level entries awarded the top grades as students flocked to pick up their results this morning. As a percentage of students who received A-star or A grades, London did pretty well, with most regions in the mid-30s for that stat. The average for England was 39.9%, so a good 4% higher in the capital. Well, though grades have dropped compared to pandemic levels, because they were purposely lowered from levels seen in 2020 and 2021 when students were assessed by teachers instead. However, the percentage is still higher than in 2019 when results were last based on pupils sitting actual exams. Education Secretary Will Quince spoke at UCAS's headquarters in Cheltenham today.
We know there was disruption for students over the past couple of years because of the pandemic. That's why we put in place adaptations, and it's why the grades largely reflect that. But of course, we've moved back to examinations, so it's the first time in 3 years that we've had examinations, albeit with adaptations. And I just want to say a huge well done to all the young people getting their results today.
Will Quince there. Now, also the big story today, the RMT's General Secretary Mick Lynch is back and talking in front of the picket lines in London at Euston Station as staff who work on Network Rail, represented by the Rail Maritime and Transport Union, the Unite Union, and the Transport Salaried Staffs Association, began striking once again this morning. Well, this is the start of 3 days of cumulative action in a long-running dispute over pay, jobs and conditions set to severely impact Londoners, as today it's just the rail, but tomorrow is the turn of the TfL as buses and the tubes go out of action for 24 hours. Well, the RMT's boss said the Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps, is getting more and more hysterical over the rail strikes.
Well, Grant Shapps is getting more and more hysterical. I try to keep a calm temperament in everything that I say. I'm not angry about this. I'm determined to get a deal. Grant Shapps seems fairly desperate. What I think you're seeing is a man who's worried about his future. He's got to try and flex his right-wing muscles in front of a parade of two really right-wing people that are going to be his boss if he has a job in the next week or two. So I don't know what Grant Shapps is up to. I don't think the employers really know what he's up to. And I don't think that the officials at the Department for Transport knows what he's up to. Last week he threatened to make everyone redundant. I think he's lost the plot slightly and he needs to get back on track and enable a settlement to this dispute.
Now, best known for his music career, with his brother in the group Rizzle Kicks, Jordan Stevens has recently announced he'll be releasing his debut children's book called The Missing Piece, with the launch taking place in London. He aims to remind us all about the journey we're all on, open our hearts and make friends. Well, with stunning illustrations by debut talent Beth Susanna. She's an advocate for diversity and challenging taboos and stereotypes in society. We heard from them both.
My goal as a kids book writer is to create kids books that are secretly for the adult reading. It was through my own experience of that I even thought that I could write a kids book. I was reading a kids book to my friend's daughter and had a moment where I was quite taken aback by the content of the book. It's written in a way where there's repetition, there's a journey, there's fun, which I hope kids will enjoy. And Beth's use of colour is just out of this world. So the idea is the book itself is a form of therapy, colour therapy. But then the actual content of the story, this idea of incompletion being the acceptance of incompletion being a true state of harmony or peace with the self. I think that's an ageless story, and so I hope that even the parent reading the story to the kid can find some solace in the book.
Coming up with the illustrations, I found that Jordan's text made it really easy, to be honest, to come up with just initial ideas. They're so full. The words he uses and the descriptions that he gives for each place that Sunny goes to and everywhere she visits along the way, they're just so descriptive. You almost can immediately dive into the story. So that was something I really wanted to bring through with the illustrations, was just to capture this world that Jordan had created, and little lines that he'd use, like the smells that he remembers each house smelling like, the kind of different flavors of each place that she goes to. I think for me that lent itself really well to the colors that I used. That was a really big driving force with the illustrations, and yeah, just trying to make it as immersive as possible. I really want people to feel like every time they turn the page and each spread they read, it's a different world that they go into, and they can really be captured and immersed and be in the very moment, not only of the story, but the moment they're in now, like while they're reading the book.
The inspiration for the story basically came from, to be honest, my own battle with completion, my desire to complete things, finish tasks, this kind of hamster wheel that we appear to be on, at least I feel like I'm on, as part of this modern society. And then there is an added touch of I suppose, love and respect to my late grandmothers. That the book is dedicated to my experiences with them, particularly with my grandmother Veronica. So big up grands out there.
Picture books hopefully are one of those things that as things turn more and more digital, that there is that essence of it being timeless, and that hopefully kids books are one of the things that will outlive us both, and that they'll carry on, and the story will kind of just, I guess, get kids and parents to have that intimate moment and be with each other, as opposed to kind of on iPads. And not that there's anything wrong with TV and digital stuff as well. But I think that there's something really slow and calm and safe about picture books, and the moment when you're reading a picture book with a child and an adult is something that's really special, and that we kind of remember more when we look back as kids. I can really remember like my sister reading books to me and making up the stories, and my parents reading to me in a way that, you know, I wonder whether we'll have the same response to kind of games and iPads and stuff like that. I think that, yeah, picture books are just a really precious space.
Today, I find great refuge in writing, actually. In my personal career, I've always been a writer of sorts, but in through different mediums. Music, most people know me for my writing in music. But I do like writing stories. I do. I suppose the battle with how society views things nowadays is maintaining an authenticity or an honesty. Maintaining an honesty. This book, The Missing Piece, I wrote it to be a timeless story. There's no technology in it. It's just about connection between people, and I want people to pick this book up and not know when it was published, you know. And that's the power of writing, and that's why I kind of focus more on it now, because it will hopefully outlive me.
There you go, that book is being published today. Time for a quick break now, but coming up, astronaut Tim Peake on the reality of life in space as he prepares to tell all on the London stage. Stay with us.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
with stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back to the final part of this evening's programme. To start with, the first Brit to land on the International Space Station, Tim Peake. He's keeping his feet firmly on the ground for his next venture as he heads to the London Palladium on the 4th of September with his one-man show called My Journey to Space. The performance gives an insight into life as an astronaut, complete with breathtaking photographs and never-before-seen footage. Hebe spoke to Tim about his show and also about the history he made back in 2015.
I was quite nervous when, my tour manager spoke to me about it. He said, "Okay, we've got an hour and a half show," and I thought, "Wow, that's a long time to fill." But it wasn't long before we realised we had too much material and we were thinning it down. But we're trying to take people on an immersive experience. What's it like to go into space, without actually physically taking you there? You're talking about living and working on the space station, spacewalking, an orbit of planet Earth, and how do you even begin to be an astronaut and all the training that we go through. So from start to finish, it's fast-paced. There's lots of audio-visual, very immersive, very interactive, and hopefully it answers every question that you might have had about what's it like to be an astronaut.
Well, what made you decide to do this? Are there lots of questions you get asked by aspiring astronauts or just the public who are completely immersed in what you did? Is this a way of kind of answering those questions?
I think there's a huge amount of interest about space and about space exploration. There always has been, at some point in our lives, we always look up to the stars and ask ourselves the big questions and wonder about space. But right now, we really are on the cusp of a new era of space exploration, going back to the moon and then missions to Mars not too far away. And so for me, it's a real opportunity to kind of interact with people and have a live show where I can go out and meet people, travel around the UK and try and share that experience of what it's like to go up into space. So I think it's really important. It's part of our job is to try and communicate that as our ambassadors for space, if you like.
Can you tell us anything more about any plans for mission to Mars?
Mars missions are really exciting. We're currently focusing on the moon, but Mars is not far behind, and lots of the technology that we're using for the moon missions can be used on the Mars mission as well. It's directly transferable. So at the moment, we're focusing on Artemis missions, which is the returning to the moon, and the very first one goes in September this year, uncrewed, and then the crewed mission goes next year around the moon like Apollo 8 did, and then the one after that will be boots on the moon again. So this is all happening in the next 4 to 5 years. So very soon we're going to watch humans walking on the moon again, which is really exciting. And soon after that, we'll be heading off to Mars. And I think the exploration of the moon and Mars will then happen in parallel. So I reckon by the mid-2030s, we'll have missions to Mars.
So when you were up in space, you ran the London Marathon while you were up there. Tell me a bit about how you did that and why you did that.
I ran my first marathon in 1999, the London Marathon, and I hadn't run a marathon since then. I'm kind of like half marathon distances suits me better. And so when I saw that I was going to be in space over April and the London Marathon was happening in that time frame, I thought, what a great idea to run it from the space station. And I was an ambassador for the Prince's Trust at the time, which I still am, and they had a team running the London Marathon. So I said to the Prince's Trust, would you like me to join your team and run it from the space station, which we all thought was a fun idea. Wasn't so much fun when I was doing it at the time, because the harness system that we use to keep you pinned down to the treadmill in weightlessness, it's only supposed to be used for about half an hour, and it's pretty painful on the collarbone. So I lost all circulation in my arms after about 30 minutes.
It doesn't sound particularly fun, but you must have raised a huge amount of money doing that for them.
Oh, it was great. They do so much brilliant work, and I think it helped to raise some money and raise awareness as well as to what they do.
You inspire so many different people with your story. What would you say to someone aspiring to be an astronaut, wanting to follow in your footsteps?
I get asked quite a lot when I'm going around talking to school children, students who are asking about, how do I become an astronaut? Which is it's a serious question, but it's great that they can ask that question, knowing that there is a path to follow today. Whereas if you're in the UK, you can become an astronaut. The most important advice I can give is nobody leaves school or college or university and joins the astronaut corps. We take astronauts from about the age of 30 upwards, and we like you to have operational experience of doing something before you become an astronaut. So the most important thing is to focus on what is it that you're going to do before you become an astronaut, and try and be passionate about it and try and be as good as you can be at that, because that will make you excel. It will make you stand out, and you'll also be having a great time and enjoying it along the way.
So you're going to be at the Palladium. How are you feeling ahead of it? Have you ever done anything like this before?
Taking the show to the London Palladium is huge. I've never done anything there before, and I cannot wait. It's going to be by far the best venue to do the show from. Really looking forward to it. It's going to be an absolute highlight. So yeah, I can't wait to do that performance.
This is also not your first time to the kind of big stage. This year, you voiced Mission Control for Buzz Lightyear movie. How was that for you?
When I got the phone call from Disney, asking would I like to be involved in the Lightyear movie, it was brilliant. And, who wouldn't want to be in a Pixar movie? So, and Lightyear was such a great fit, and the team were brilliant. And I just enjoyed that whole experience as well. So no, that's been fantastic. I think my two children enjoyed it probably more than I did when they got to go to the premiere too.
My final question is, and it might be a tricky one to answer, but if there was one sentence you could sum up your trip to the space station, what would it be?
Oh, to sum it up in one sentence. If I was to say one word, which is an overused word, but this is a word in the true sense, and that's awesome. Because it is an awesome view and an experience to go up there, to look down on the planet, and to see ourselves, to see all of humanity in one place, and to be able to look the other way and to think about how did we get there.
There you go. If you want to see Tim, that's the 4th of September at the Palladium. Now, it's been 3 years since Game of Thrones last graced our screens, and now the mythical world returns with a prequel, House of the Dragon. And it's set 200 years earlier and focuses on a civil war known as the Dance of Dragons. The show stars gathered in central London this week for the premiere, including Rhys, Ifans and Steve Toussaint, who have spoken about the racist abuse he faced after being cast in the role.
Splintering shields and ringing swords. And I placed my heir upon the Iron Throne. And all the dragons roared as one.
I consider the matter urgent. That of your succession.
Who else would have a claim?
The firstborn child.
Rhaenyra. No queen has ever sat the Iron Throne.
I think what defines a great actor is generosity. Generosity, creative generosity. And every single actor I've worked with on this show has that in bounds, you know, and we've become very close as a cast as a result, you know. It's been beautiful.
King has an heir, Daemon Targaryen.
I will not be made to choose between my brother and my daughter.
Certain people have let it be known that they aren't happy in no uncertain terms. If I am, because it's a nice day, I'm going to tell you the glib answer. There are shows that come on TV that I don't watch. Some shows I don't like. There are actors that I don't like. I've never felt the need to broadcast that to anybody. I just don't watch them. If you feel the need to take your time to broadcast to the world that you don't like a particular show, or in fact, as some people have, get in contact with me on my timeline and tell me how much you don't want me to be in it, then there's something wrong with your life.
I mean, I always, on the script it was brilliant, on the page it's extraordinary, filming it was an extraordinary experience, and then getting to watch how the brilliant production team put the whole thing together is, it's amazing. Yeah.
Rhaenyra's succession will be challenged.
What can they expect? A lot of drama, a lot of dysfunction, a lot of blonde hair, and maybe some racy stuff.
You are the king. Your duty is to take a new wife.
It's exciting. It's great. Yeah, I feel like I've struck gold. I was saying down there, it's a rare thing for an actor to be able to be involved in a project like this at any point in their career. So, no, I'm counting my lucky stars and enjoying every second.
I'm your heir. War is afoot.
Do you think the realm will ever accept me as their queen?
A woman would not inherit the Iron Throne.
Because that is the order of things.
There you go, House of Dragon airs starting this Sunday. Let's just take one final look at the weather for you now before we leave. Cloud cover will be sticking around tonight, lows of around 18 degrees. Sunshine's back tomorrow though, highs of around 25. Looking ahead to Saturday, staying in the mid-20s with patches of cloud expected in places, but it should be bright as well. Sunday still warm, 23 degrees and cloudy. Right, that's all we've got time for this evening. Thank you for watching. Do join us again at the very same time tomorrow. I'll see you then.